Welcome back to the Producer Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Versman, and today we are joined by producer Andrea Royer. We're excited to talk to Andrea about her producer journey, producing music videos, and her work with the band For King and Country. So without further ado, let's dive in and get started. Thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think maybe just like a cool place to start would be to hear kind of how you got started doing film and kind of what led you to being a producer working in the industry.
Yeah, so it wasn't something where I just woke up one day and thought, I want to be a producer. That title and that role sounds interesting to me. I've always been in the industry in one way or another. I grew up in a dance studio in Southern California and ended up working at Disneyland for 5 years out of high school. So I was always in entertainment, and I started looking for different ways to be a part of the industry and worked at a radio station. And then my church, which was a really large church, had a bulletin ad for a video assistant. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. That's, the world I work in and I'm passionate about. So let me just jump in. And every single day there was something that someone needed to fulfill the role. And I just kept saying, I'll do it. I'll do it. I've never done it, but I'll do it. And then one day I'm a producer, and it wasn't something that I set out with a plan for, but I just knew those opportunities were, it was really the hand of the Lord that directed me. And I just kept saying, I'll do it. And through that, the church I was working for was Harvest Ministries with Greg Laurie, who they just released a film about his story called Jesus Revolution. But I worked for that ministry, and he wrote a book called Steve McQueen, The Salvation of an American Icon. And the Irwin brothers, or now Kingdom Story Company, they wanted to turn it into a film. So they were doing the documentary, and whenever they were in California, Greg offered my services. He's like, hey, use my producer when you're around. And so they kept using me and connected me with Ben Smallbone through their feature film, I Still Believe, which was the Jeremy Camp story. And so I produced Second Unit on that, and Ben Smallbone was the director of Second Unit. And after that experience, he said, hey, I've got a For King and Country live concert event coming up that we're going to film and release. And because of your experience doing Harvest Crusades and live music and then producing film as well, it's, a great opportunity, I think, for us to work together. So that was my first For King and Country project. And we ended up winning a Dove Award for it too, which was really honoring to be able to be a part of that. But from there, I did every single For King and Country thing since for the last 3 years. So that's, I think, the short story, or the long version, however you want to see it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool to hear how you got going. Because I was the same way. I was never anticipating going down the producer path, and I said yes to something, and that just kept things going from there.
Yeah. And it's hard to put in, it's hard to even just say, hey, I want to be a producer. I have a lot of young people come to me and say, hey, I want to be a producer. And I'm like, well, do you know what that means? Because a lot of people don't even know what a producer is. And there's so many types of producers. I'm like, what do you think you're saying you want to be? And a lot of times, maybe it's not even a producer. It's like, oh, well, I want to do budgets, or I wanted to do all creative. And it's, Producer, it's a really all-encompassing term, I think.
Yes.
So the first thing I like to ask is, well, when you say you want to be a producer, what do you think that means? And then we go from there.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to start the conversation for sure.
Yeah.
Or like music videos something you always wanted to do, or did that just as well kind of come about to where like that's now like one of the main things you kind of work on in the industry?
Uh no, I didn't really zero in on exactly what I had wanted to do. My experience for the 10 years prior to joining the For King and Country Ben Smallbone team was the live crusades for Harvest. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but these crusades are a mix of live music and a message and then video elements. So we would produce short films that would roll into the crusade where we were also producing the live concert. And then Pastor Greg would come out and give a message at the end. It's very much like the Billy Graham crusade model. So through that, I was very hands-on with the artists and the musicians, and as the showrunner, figuring out how to incorporate the music with the message and the film shorts. And so it was a hybrid of film, it was a hybrid of music, and music was always my favorite part. Growing up a dancer, the music was the driving force behind everything. So I don't think it was a surprise that taking the film experience I had with the music experience and putting it together, it just made sense. And there was a moment where I saw all the opportunities that God had given me throughout my entire life. They were all training grounds for what I'm doing now, which is still film, but we still choose to do music videos for the fun. And music videos are kind of like a playground for creativity. You don't have the same rules you have in documentaries or films.
Right.
So we, in addition to everything else we do, we continue to do music videos because they stretch your imagination, they stretch your problem solving skills, they stretch your ability to make the most out of a budget. And they're kind of like a hobby within your own industry. It's like your hobbies are what you just do for fun, and then you have your job sometimes.
Yeah.
But music videos, it's like we get to do what we love, but we get to do it in a different and creative outside of the box space.
I've never heard it put that way, but I've worked on one music video before, and I would definitely agree with that. Kind of jumping in to the process of making a music video, like whether it's the artist or the director coming to you about the project, like what questions, I guess, are you asking to really make sure you're understanding like what their vision is for the project?
Yeah. So we've worked with a handful of artists. And what we do first is we just get the song and we just listen to it on repeat until we feel like the song is telling us a story. And then we go to the artist and we say, hey, this is what we feel when we hear your song. This is how we interpret visually how your song makes us feel. And we put it together in a pitch and we give it to the artist. And depending on who the artist is, we may collaborate with them, or they may just say, hey, we didn't have any idea. That's why we came to you. Some people just come to us because they don't know how to put their song into a visual concept. So they come to us and say, you tell us what the visual concept should be. And then, we'll work with them. But then there's the artists who are very hands-on. And then we're more of a partner in it with them. And what that looks like is it's the same thing. We sit in the song for a while ourselves and take our interpretation to the artist and make sure it aligns. And then it's more of a collaborative, like, yeah, that's great. So what if we did that? And then we tweaked it this way and we did this here. And then, we're like, well, yeah, we love that. But what if we did it this way? And it becomes a real living thing where it's constantly evolving with the artist. It's very much like that with For King and Country, for sure, where it's a real creative partnership in how we're going to tell this story.
So when you're collaborating, like, some artists, they'll do like multiple music videos sometimes per even like their albums that are coming out. Like, how do you go about crafting, I guess, like a story that not only maybe like fits with the song, but like works with like the album?
Yeah. So we did that on this last For King and Country album. And basically we wanted all the videos to not necessarily butt up in order, but we wanted to, keep it. They were always on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll look for something common in the tracks like that we're always on a journey. But we did not do a conceptual theme throughout the entire album. If I think that's what you were asking.
Yeah.
But no, it's the same thing. We had toyed with those ideas of how we would attach each one. And we did do, for instance, we had in Broken Halos, they were flying.
Mm-hmm.
And we had them land on the rooftop that they started in Relate. So we would find ways to connect the environments so that the story would have a through thread. What's challenging though with that is you can think you're going to do it in order, and then the label comes to you and says, oh, we're not going to make that a single anymore, so we're not going to do a music video.
Okay.
And so you can have the grandest of plans, but at the end of the day, the label will come in and they can undo those plans, which we had with another artist a couple of times. We had these plans, like things were in motion. We had scouted, we had location permits, we had travel for crew and travel for band. And then in an instant, the label decides, well, this isn't the single we want to release anymore, so we're going to abandon that whole idea. And you have to pivot. So we had a little bit of that, trying to, create a conceptual idea that connected 5 music videos. And we couldn't do that as seamlessly as we had wanted because a marketing plans shifted and they wanted to do a different song and they wanted to release it in a different order. So you could come with this perfect, seamless, put together plan, and then the label can just throw a bomb in there and change it all in an instant. And you have to abandon your plan and shift and come up with something new in maybe a day or 2 days that's just as unique and pulled together and refined as something that you had spent 4 weeks on.
Yeah, no, I hadn't even really thought that much about like the label's involvement and what they can do in music videos. So like, how does that work? Like, do they usually still have to give sign off on music videos, or are they
Yes.
more
Yeah.
involved?
Yeah, no, the label does have to sign off on the concept, and depending on the artist's relationship with the label, there can be a little more give and take. It just depends on how much the label might trust their artist, but you have layers to that. You have the people who decide which song is the strongest to be released and which order they want to release them. And then you have the marketing team who wants to market it in a very specific way. So they all get a say in what you can and can't do. But when you present a really strong pitch deck and an idea and you're passionate about it, we've never had the label talk us out of an idea. We've been very fortunate that the labels have always greenlit our ideas, except for the time they didn't cancel our idea, they canceled the song. So that would be a case where the label just went a different direction with what they wanted their artist to release. But they can definitely, they're the ones who are writing the paychecks.
Yep.
And they've never said no to an idea, but they have asked us to make it with less money.
I can definitely see that. And that kind of ties into another question I had, which was like, how does budgeting for music videos usually work? Is that where like they're coming saying, like, here's what we have to spend, like, how can we do this? Or are you usually crafting a budget around the concept and then having to go get that approved?
Both. Sometimes they say, hey, you've got this much for this song. And sometimes we give them an idea. And when we give them the creative concept, we give them a budget that would make it a reality and let them say, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
So that's based on each artist and each label.
So I guess since you have done not only music videos but also worked on like documentaries and films and that, like, are there any unique things that you find you're budgeting when it comes to music videos that maybe you don't normally budget for in other projects?
No, I don't think so. Depending on the creative concept, you might be looking for things that you're not going to look for in a documentary where you're shooting interviews, because you're going to be looking for, a stunt team or something that you wouldn't need for just sit down interviews. But yeah, I think outside of things like stunt teams that cause your insurance to have to go through the roof, there's not anything. I basically start with the same budget template for any project, and then I just pull out anything that doesn't pertain to that project. But yeah, I can't think of any one thing that would be unique to just a music video.
So another kind of like pre-production aspect you'd mentioned was like location scouting and getting permits for locations. And I know quite a few of the music videos you've worked on have shot across the country. I guess, how have you gone about finding a lot of those? Are you using like local location scouts and stuff, or are you like going out and scouting them yourself?
No, we like to find locations ourselves, because a lot of times the locations will inspire the idea.
Okay.
And we just love location scouting. Sometimes it's just from our desk in Nashville and it's online. And then we might go out a couple days before to see it in person. But just while we're out filming any project, we're always taking note of locations we stumble across, and thinking, wow, this is a special spot. We need to remember this for a future project. But we like to do our own location scouting because it just really stimulates the creative behind the concept.
Because I'm sure every producer has a story, but like, what was there any location that turned out to be like way harder or more of a challenge to secure or deal with than you thought it was, like going into the project?
Yes. I would say we filmed out in the Mojave Desert,
Okay.
in California, but near the Vegas, the Nevada line. So you could enter this desert from California side or from the Nevada side.
Hmm.
And there are these sand dunes that first we couldn't find anybody who governed the land. And then we finally found somebody who governed it, and it was down to the wire. But we had the band booked, travel booked, crew booked. We had our base camp, which had to consist of an RV with people who would drive us around in ATVs. We had it all booked without even having the location because there wasn't really an office that governed the land that could give us concrete answers. But we just went in with faith that it was just going to come together.
Hmm.
And so not only was it challenging to just get it together, which the license did land the day we were all there, but then a sandstorm kicked up that was so fierce we had to shut down production.
Oh, wow.
And we had to ask everybody, the base camp, ATV runners, the label had to approve leaving the band out there for another day and paying the cost to delay everybody's travel for another day, because we had a guest artist too. It wasn't just the band we were filming with. They had a guest artist coming in, and the wind just blew us out. The wind was so bad you couldn't see. It was like being in fog made of sand. You couldn't see anywhere. And it was painful too. That sand would whip your face and it was painful. So we all sat out there for a couple hours waiting for it to wind down, and it didn't wind down. So we just had to call it and retired for the day. And then when we came back the next day, it was perfect weather. And the sand even looked more beautiful because the dunes had been perfectly swept with the wind.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a challenge to secure the area, but then it was even more of a challenge to film there. But we made it work.
Yeah, I can relate to having to trust that everything's going to come together on
Yeah.
projects. It's
Yeah.
never fun, but
No, it's definitely gives you a little anxiety.
so I guess like another question I had is like, what does, I guess you would say, a typical day on the set of a music video look like for a producer? Like, it's film, so usually there's nothing typical about any day. But yeah,
Yeah.
like what do you normally do like during the production of a music video?
Well, I would say I'm the first one awake and the last one to go to sleep, because when day one is over, you're prepping for day two and prepping the call sheet and making troubleshooting anything that went wrong that day and making sure it doesn't go wrong the next day. So you're always, there's been many music videos where we sleep 3 hours maybe. But you're not really sleeping because you're still problem solving while your eyes are closed until it's time to go. But there's something incredible that happens. You just run on adrenaline, and it's crazy how you can actually thrive under sleepless conditions for days. But it starts with, making sure first thing in the morning or, whenever you're shooting, that everybody, one, that the location's ready, two, that your people are at the location that are going to be receiving gear drop-offs or catering drop-offs or base camp drop-offs like bathrooms and trailers. So usually I'm not on site for that because I'm usually behind with the director and the talent. So I have our production coordinator, our first AD, go ahead, but I'm constantly communicating just to make sure that they didn't oversleep, that they made it on time, that the location was open, that the parking lot was available, and that everything's starting to load in. So that's usually day one. And if we're doubling up things, like sometimes you have to double up wardrobe fittings because the artist didn't have time until we get on site. So might be working with the artist, going through final wardrobe or final creative, or walking through how we're going to shoot or block something, depending on how involved the artist is themselves. And then getting everybody out to location and making sure that the camera department get up and running. It seems like if you're not checking on someone, somebody's just sitting there waiting to be checked on before they start doing something. So the one thing that's never getting done is the one thing that you assumed was getting done. So I just make sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's always the one thing I assume and don't check on. It's the one thing that didn't get done, and that's where the little issues arise. So
Right.
that's my biggest rule, is don't assume anything. And I still do it. There's always something that I assume and I don't think to follow up on, and that's the one thing that got missed. So I would say that's it. And then depending on what type of producer you are, I'm a creative producer, so I'm involved in writing the concept, but then making sure the concept comes to life on set. So I'm very involved with the director and the artist to make sure that creatively it's coming to life, which is why we have a strong team, that each department has a strong department head leading their own team, so that I can be focused on the overall creative coming to life.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, pretty much the same thing that we did in the morning, I'll make sure we undo at the end of the day. And that's making sure every department is loading out. Every department's got all of their areas packed up, doing the dummy check, making sure nobody left anything behind, that there's no lens caps or art supplies or trash bags, and just making sure I'm the last eyes on everything, and that we leave the location better than we found it, and closing things up with the location manager and making sure everybody gets out safely and in one piece. And then go back and wrap with the director, go through our shot list, make sure we got all of our shots, and then work with our production coordinator or assistant and getting the call sheet together and out for day 2 if we have a day 2.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that was something else I was kind of wondering, like with a lot of music videos, how many days? Like,
Yeah, that depends on the concept and the budget.
okay.
Yeah. And a lot of times it honestly just depends on the artist's availability, because a lot of times they're like, I just don't have more than a day.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes if a concept really calls for it, we'll fight for more days and push for it. And we'll tell them, hey, you're going to sacrifice the creative quality on this if you don't give us more time. And we're not afraid to say it. We're not afraid to challenge. And when I say we, I'm talking about my business partner and director Ben Smallbone. We are not afraid to tell the studio or the artist exactly what we think needs to be done without sacrificing creative. And then the ball is in their court. And usually 9 times out of 10, they always completely understand. But we don't like to assume when they say no, we don't just accept it. We're like, well, when this is what you're saying no to.
Right.
So if your artist can't give us 2 days, then you're saying no to this, and we're going to have to dumb it down. And is that worth it to you? It's not worth it to us, but is it worth it to you? And usually they're like, oh no, now that you've explained it, we get it. So let's make 2 days happen.
You mentioned kind of when you're talking through kind of what your day on set looked like, working with a lot of like the different department heads and that. So I guess like when it comes to crew, like how big are your typical crews? Are these, do you keep it more smaller, like sometimes you see a lot of like more commercial work, or these, especially when there's more creative story elements, do you
Yeah.
get more bigger crews in there?
Yeah. We've had anywhere from a 2-person crew to an 80-person crew.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it depends on the location, it depends on the concept and creative, but we've done literally down to 2 people. When COVID hit, we had to get very creative.
Mm-hmm.
So we got very comfortable working with a 6-person-ish team.
Yeah.
But we got really creative and were able to work with a 2 to 3 person crew easily. Sometimes it's better. You get in and you get out quicker and easier. So yeah, an example would be, since you're familiar with the For King Country music videos, For God Is With Us, we filmed that with 2 to 3 people, but then Broken Halos, we had over 60 on set. So it just depends on the concept. And I don't think the quality you wouldn't notice a difference in the quality.
No.
But For God Is With Us, we just 3 of us went on the road with For King and Country, and we filmed in varying locations around the venues that they were performing at. And because we were on the go, it was, hey, we only have room for 2 or 3 people on the bus. So that's all we had. But the quality doesn't change because sometimes it's easier. You don't have as many rules. You're not having to move as many people, and you could definitely do some more interesting things.
Yes, that's for sure. Um, Speaking of if the Broken Halos one, if I'm remembering right, that one had a little bit heavier on kind of the stunts and visual effects side of projects. So, how do you go about deciding like what visual effects are doable, or what stunts are doable within the time you have to do a music video um, on set, and then, so that it can be the quality it needs to be?
Yeah, that one depended on money, honestly.
Okay.
We wanted to fly them from a helicopter, and we were working with a helicopter pilot and his stunt team, and we were going to fly them from the helicopter, but the label said we just don't have that kind of money, and that's also a risk we don't want to take. We don't want to fly Joel and Luke from a helicopter. So we had to dumb it down to a crane, but we did everything we could to make it look just as quality as the helicopter. And we brought in a stunt team that's one of their specialties. And so they taught them how to hang and move and fly from the crane in a way that would work. And then because they were on a crane, we had to do things in post that we wouldn't have had to do otherwise, like painting out the crane in a lot of the shots. Yeah. So we saved the label some money with the helicopter, but they had to pay a little extra money in post because they needed us to go down to a more affordable option.
I have just some wrap-up questions.
Yeah.
Some of them are music video based, and a few of them are just more general producer based.
Yeah.
So I guess to start off, like, what's maybe been either like one of the biggest challenges you've faced, or one of the like biggest maybe lessons you've learned in producing music videos?
Gosh, one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest lessons I've learned is, I mentioned it a bit before, is assuming that something was done and not checking the work myself. But at the same time, it's a challenge and it's a lesson, but I don't regret giving people ownership and leadership and space to do their job without hovering. So it's sort of a catch-22, in that I love giving people their own They don't need a backseat producer, I love trusting people and empowering them to do the job that they have. Sometimes it ends up kind of biting us a little bit. But I don't regret giving somebody a chance to fly themselves.
Yeah, I've been in that position before where it's like you want to give them freedom, but also how do you make sure it gets done?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just honing our own skills at evaluating the people that we're entrusting tasks to. But at the end of the day, no one can be a one-man team. Like, we need a team. So finding the people that you can rely on and trust, and then empowering them to grow without babysitting them is super important to me. And I don't ever want to stifle someone. There's times where it's like, you just want to say, just let me do it. But somebody allowed me to say, hey, I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out. And so empowering other people to grow in the same way is something I really believe in. And sometimes, a lot of times, when they don't execute it well or at all, and they fall short, I am the responsible party, who the executive producers and the financiers and the studios are saying, well, what happened? It is my fault, but I don't regret giving somebody an opportunity. I think everyone deserves to have an opportunity.
Yes. I'm very grateful for some of the times people have given me opportunities
Yeah.
to learn and grow. And I definitely made mistakes along the way that other people would definitely wouldn't have made. But
yeah. And a mistake doesn't mean we send somebody away. We let people make, maybe we're a little too gracious in that because we root for people. But I would rather be rooting for someone than just, saying thanks, but no thanks.
So then, what would maybe be like one piece of advice you'd give to somebody that's getting ready to produce their first music video?
Oh, don't assume that somebody else is taking care of something. Just never assume. Make sure, even, it's annoying to people at times, but never assume. When my teams get irritated with me, sometimes I tell them it's a quote from the Jerry Maguire movie when Jerry says, help me help you. And it's, a good reminder that I'm not doing any of this for me. I'm doing all of this for the overall creative vision. So, help me help you by, letting me ask the questions and bug you with deadlines and ask for reviews and ask if you got that done. I think that would be it. Yeah.
Sounds good. I have two questions left. The first one is like either what's a piece of advice or what's something you've learned about having to balance working on like multiple projects at the same time?
What I've learned is sometimes it's okay to stop and say, I'm only going to focus on this one particular project for this next hour or this next day. I used to make sure I had everything moving all at once, and I still do that many days. I don't always take my own advice, but I find that if I just seclude a certain amount of hours or a full day, I can't turn projects off for more than a day. But something is at its height, to say, hey, I'm not going to answer any emails or any texts that aren't in regards to this particular project. Everything can wait until tomorrow. That's something that I've really learned, is it's okay to say some things can wait until tomorrow while I focus on this one particular project today, because we do always have 3+. There's something in prep, there's something in production, and there's something in post. There's usually multiple things in prep, multiple things in post, and one thing in production. So yeah, it's okay to say this can wait until tomorrow, and today is for this job, this project. And I think too, it's okay to be honest with the other clients. Like, hey, we're wrapping up this thing today, but we'll respond to you tomorrow. Because a lot of times your silence, it gives them anxiety. So if you just tell them, hey, I saw that email and I'll respond tomorrow, and then you just mark it unread and leave it on the back burner until tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So my final question then is, what's one piece of advice you would give to somebody that's just like starting out on their producer journey?
Oh, no task is too beneath you, and those tasks should never be beneath you. I think to become a producer, you just got to show up, whether it's taking out the trash or, you know, being the wrangler to the star. It doesn't matter what the task is. They're all equal and they're all important, and never think that something is more important than the other, and never think that something is so unimportant that you don't need to do it.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, I really notice it changes the whole rapport with the crew. When you just walk in and, you know, you show up late and you leave early, and you don't see yourself as part of the crew. And maybe it's because I started as part of the crew as a PA. And I think it just creates a real camaraderie among everybody when they see that the producer is cleaning a table and bagging up trash. They're not just sitting in a chair while other people do the work, because I don't think there's any difference. I can be sitting next to the talent, talking through creative, or I could be at the table with the PA helping them clean. I think it's all just as important. I don't think any task is better. Every task is different, and there needs to be people to fulfill everything. But I don't think you should ever forget where you came from. And I feel my whole team is that way. The director is carrying sandbags with the utility. I mean, somebody might walk in, and if they don't know us, they wouldn't know who's the PA or who's the producer or who's the director or who's the utility, because when it comes down to it, we all should be putting in the work and the time.
Definitely. I agree. A lot of the sets I've been on where the directors and the producers have been willing to do that have always been some of the best sets I've been on.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely notice a difference.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of the show. So thank you again so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
And on that note, we are going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.